Chapter 3 of The Dog Crusoe and His Master. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Allison Hester of Athens, Georgia. The Dog Crusoe and His Master by R.M. Ballantyne. Chapter 3. Speculative remarks with which the reader may or may not agree. An old woman. Hopes and wishes commingled with hard facts. The dog Crusoe's education begun. It is pleasant to look upon a serene, quiet, humble face. On such a face did Richard Varley look every night when he entered his mother's cottage. Mrs. Varley was a widow, and she had followed the fortunes of her brother, Daniel Hood, ever since the death of her husband. Love for her only brother induced her to forsake the peaceful village of Maryland and enter upon the wild life of a backwoods settlement. Dick's mother was thin and old and wrinkled, but her face was stamped with a species of beauty which never fades, the beauty of a loving look. Ah, the brow of snow and the peach-bloom cheek may snare the heart of man for a time, but the loving look alone can forge that adamantine chain that time, age, eternity shall never break. Mistake us not, reader, and bear with us if we attempt to analyze this look which characterized Mrs. Varley. A rare diamond is worth stopping to glance at, even when one is in a hurry. The brightest jewel in the human heart is worth a thought or two. By a loving look we do not mean a look of love bestowed on a beloved object. That is common enough, and thankful should we be that it is so common in a world that's over full of hatred. Still less do we mean that smile and look of intense affection with which some people, good people too, greet friends and foe alike, and by which effort to work out their beau ideal of the expression of Christian love, they do so signally damage their cause by saddening the serious and repelling the gay. Much less do we mean that perpetual smile of goodwill which argues more of personal comfort and self-love than anything else. No, the loving look we speak of is as often grave as gay. Its character depends very much on the face through which it beams, and it cannot be counterfeited. Its ring defies imitation. Like the clouded sun of April, it can pierce through tears of sorrow. Like the noontide sun of summer, it can blaze in warm smiles. Like the northern lights of winter, it can gleam in the depths of woe. But it is always the same, modified, doubtless, and rendered more or less patent to others, according to the natural amiability of him or her who bestows it. No one can put it on, still less can any one put it off. Its range is universal. It embraces all mankind, though, of course, it is intensified on a few favorite objects. Its seat in the depths of a renewed heart, and its foundation lies in love to God. Young Varley's mother lived in a cottage which was the smallest possible dimensions consistent with comfort. It was made of logs, as, indeed, were all other cottages in the valley. The door was in the center, and a passage from it to the back of the dwelling divided it into two rooms. One of these was subdivided by a thin partition, the inner room being Mrs. Varley's bedroom, the outer Dick's. Daniel Hood's dormitory was a corner of the kitchen, which apartment also served as a parlor. The rooms were lighted by two windows, one on each side of the door, which gave to the house the appearance of having a nose and two eyes. Houses of this kind have literally got a sort of expression on, if we may use the word, their countenances. Square windows give the appearance of easy-going placidity, longish ones that of surprise. Mrs. Varley's was a surprised cottage, and this was in keeping with the scene in which it stood, for the clear lake in front, studded with islands, and the distant hills beyond, composed a scene so surprisingly beautiful that it never failed to call forth an expression of astonished admiration from every new visitor to the Mustang Valley. "My boy!" exclaimed Mrs. Varley as her son entered the cottage with a bound. "Why so hurried to-day? Dearie me, where got you the grand gun?" "Won it, mother." "Won it, my son?" I won it, mother. Druv the nail almost, and would have druv it altogether had I been more used to Joe Blunt's rifle." Mrs Varley's heart beat high, and her face flushed with pride as she gazed at her son, who laid the rifle on the table for her inspection, while he rattled off an animated and somewhat disjointed account of the match. "Deary me, now that was good. That was clever. What's that scraping at the door?" "Oh, that's Fan. I forgot her. Here, here, Fan. Come in, good dog," he cried, rising and opening the door. Fan entered and stopped short, evidently uncomfortable. "My boy, what are ye with the Major's dog?" "Won her too, mother." "Won her, my son?" "Ay, won her, and the pup too. See, here it is," and he plucked Crusoe from his bosom. Crusoe, having found his position to be one of great comfort, had fallen into a profound slumber, and, on being thus unceremoniously awakened, he gave forth a yelp of discontent that brought Fan in a state of frantic sympathy to his side. "There you are, Fan, take it to a corner and make yourself at home. Ay, that's right, mother. Give her something to eat. She's hungry, I know by the look o' her eye." "Deary me, Dick," said Mrs Varley, who now proceeded to spread the youth's midday meal before him. "Did you drive the nail 3 times?" "No, only once, and that not parfetly. Brought 'em all down at one shot, rifle, Fan, and pup." "Well, well, now that was clever, but—" Here the old woman paused and looked grave. "But what, mother?" "You'll be wanting to go off to the mountains now, I fear me, boy." "Wantin' now?" exclaimed the youth earnestly. "I'm always wantin'. I've been wantin' ever since I could walk. But I won't go till you let me, mother, that I won't," and he struck the table with his fist so forcibly that the platters rung again. "You're a good boy, Dick, but you're too young yet to venture among the redskins." "And yet if I don't venture young, I'd better not venture at all. You know, mother dear, I don't want to leave you, but I was born to be a hunter, and everybody in them's parts is a hunter, and I can't hunt in the kitchen, you know, mother." At this point conversation was interrupted by a sound that caused young Varley to spring up and seize his rifle, and Fan to show her teeth and growl. "Hist, mother, that's like horses' hoofs," he whispered, opening the door and gazing intently in the direction whence the sound came. Louder and louder it came, until an opening in the forest showed the advancing cavalcade to be a party of white men. In another moment they were in full view, a band of about 30 horsemen, clad in the leathern costume and armed with the long rifle of the far west. Some were portions of the gaudy Indian dress, which gave to them a brilliant, dashing look. They came on straight for the blockhouse, and saluted the Varleys with a jovial cheer as they swept past at full speed. Dick returned the cheer with compound interest, and calling out, "They're trappers, mother. I'll be back in about an hour," bounded off like a deer through the woods, taking a short cut in order to reach the blockhouse before them. He succeeded, for, just as he arrived at the house, the cavalcade wheeled round the bend in the river, dashed up the slope, and came to a sudden halt on the green. Vaulting from their foaming steeds, they tied them to the stockades of the little fortress, which they entered in a body. Hot haste was in every motion of these men. They were trappers, they said, on their way to the Rocky Mountains to hunt and trade furs. But one of their number had been treacherously murdered and scalped by a Pawnee chief, and they resolved to revenge his death by an attack on one of the Pawnee villages. They would teach these red reptiles to respect white men, they would, come of it what might, and they had turned aside here to procure an additional supply of powder and lead. In vain did the major endeavor to dissuade these reckless men from their purpose. They scoffed at the idea of returning good for evil, and insisted on being supplied. The log hut was a store as well as a place of defense, and as they offered to pay for it, there was no refusing their request. At least so the major thought. The ammunition was therefore given to them, and in half an hour they were away again at full gallop over the plains on their mission of vengeance. 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.' But these men knew not what God said, because